Good evening, everyone. My name is Colin Yoxall. I'm the Communications Specialist for the College of Education at the University of Texas at Arlington. Thank you for coming to this first in a series of panel discussions by the college's Center for Education Policy Practice and Research. This will be a discussion about what education looks like in the post-COVID world, and this panel specifically will talk about new types of learning in a socially distanced environment. As you all have probably seen, this session will be recorded. I'd like at this time to introduce Dr. Catherine Robert, who will be moderating this discussion. Dr. Robert.
Thank you, Colin. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Tonight's session is the first of 4 panels that discuss the role of educational leaders in our post-COVID world. Here to welcome us tonight is Dean Teresa Doty from the College of Education. Dean Doty, would you like to say a few words?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm glad to at least to be here at home in front of my computer, but to welcome all of you here this evening. I'm delighted to see so many of you here on what I know is really going to be a valuable and informative discussion. And I'm excited to see a few familiar faces. I know we spent some time in Scotland back in the spring, which was very exciting. So good to see some of you. Hi, Stacy. As we are all aware, and in fact, that's a story unto itself at the beginning of the pandemic when we got called home from Scotland. Yeah, that was fun. But as we're all aware, the past 8 months have just been an adventure. It's really reshaped our world and how we function in it. And certainly not more so than in education. You know, observing the incredible response by our school leaders, teachers, and staff in our public schools, as well as even at the university, just really made me proud to be part of this incredible profession. Everyone has been incredibly proactive. And in fact, I've heard more than one person note that our education professionals had to advance their technology infrastructure and practices by more than a decade, just in the short period of time, and put in all these new policies and procedures just to ensure the safety of employees and students that we're serving, all the while continuing to find really creative ways to continue serving students, families, and communities. It's just been incredible. And while there's much that we've learned, we know that there are always ways that in which we can continue to improve the work that we're doing, and especially under these circumstances. So I hope that tonight's panel will offer some insight into some new practices or solutions to current challenges as we consider how to continue the work that we do. I hope that you enjoy it. I know that our panelists are fabulous professionals who are dealing with this every day, and so I know it's going to be great. So thank you, and have a good session.
Thank you, Dean Doty. We appreciate you being here. We also appreciate your ongoing leadership throughout these turbulent times, because we know it hasn't been easy for you. As educators, we've all been scrambling for several months to continue the critical work of educating young minds. Here at UTA, we've shifted from traditional face-to-face learning to a variety of other practices, ranging from asynchronous learning, synchronous online meetings, and creative blending of in-person but distanced learnings, online and small group sessions. Our educational leaders had immediate emergency duties of ensuring student and staff safety, provision of basic resources, and technology access. It was fascinating to see the ingenious and creative solutions that students, faculty, support staff, and administrators found along the way. Now that some of the dust has settled, it's a good time to assess some of these new modalities and consider what we would like to see further develop in the future. With me tonight are 3 school administrators leading the way in these new practices. Dr. Denise Beutel, joining us from Richardson ISD as their Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. Steve Simpson of Arlington ISD serves as their Director of Technology, Integration, and Innovation. And last but not least, Elaine Plybon from Keller ISD is the Director of Personalized Learning Opportunities. Panelists, thank you for joining us this evening. Your work is critical to a broad base of people, and as we can see from the variety of attendees, we have graduate students, teacher candidates, professors, and administrators in both higher education and K-12 with us tonight. Our panelists will answer a few questions, and we will save time at the end for questions that you have entered into the chat as our audience. Before we dig in, I want to be sure to address our bigger issues. We have a heartbreaking number of students who lack basic technology access and/or who have missed related services, misreceiving related services. We will dig further into those issues in December. For tonight, we are discussing our unprecedented, unplanned technological experiment and positive results to date. With that said, let's begin with Dr. Beutel. Dr. Beutel, we're going to have you tell us a little bit about what you do, and then I'll ask you a couple of questions.
Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me today. It's such an honor to be able to be here and talk with these great group of educators and participate in this dialogue. So thank you for the opportunity. I am the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning with Richardson ISD. And so what that means, because I know that that can be different in different districts, is we are pre-K-12. Our team works to support our campuses and our teachers, most specifically with the curriculum and resources and instructional tools in all core content areas: library services, bilingual ESL, health PE, pretty much anything general ed, core content for all content areas. And so instructional technology is not within our group, but literally next door, and we collaborate, especially in these times. We collaborate daily, and sometimes hourly, and sometimes minute to minute. But our team has worked to support campuses in meeting the challenges of serving kids during this time, and we do that every day, but even more so where we are now.
All right, well, let's look way back at March. It probably seems like a million years ago. What are the main platforms that your district was using for sharing lessons with students digitally?
So we are fortunate that our board gave the guidance and made the commitment through bond efforts in our community for us to be a one-to-one district a few years ago. Mm-hmm. So we were already very fortunate to be able to have access to our technology, and with that brought Schoology as our LMS system. So that was already in place, which was very helpful. We are a Google district, so many of our teachers are very well versed in Google Classroom. And then we have ClassLink, which is, and so those of you that are more in the instructional technology realm, my ignorance will probably begin to show. But ClassLink is then our single sign-on mechanism by which our students log in and click to get there to the different applications and access Schoology and that many of the educational opportunities that our teachers push out.
And so do the staff share the files through the same platforms? Do you have
So we share mostly, through Google and Schoology. So we do a lot of professional learning. And so we'll have first grade, second grade, Algebra 1, librarian groups where we can push out to all of our teachers as well.
Great.
Through Schoology.
Okay. So how did they work for you once we were online learning and that, we were no longer in person?
Well, because those were common practices, it was nice. We didn't have to spend a lot of time in this is the way in which we're going to do file sharing. We didn't have to. Now, perhaps that's probably different from the technical side, but like my team, we didn't have to worry about space. And, if we were creating videos and then we could just push them out and put them onto the Schoology platform or load them into Google Classroom. And we didn't have to worry about that piece. We really had the luxury of focusing on content mm-hmm. and delivery of in the ways in which our teachers could deliver to students.
Okay, great.
And so that works nicely. I will say when we moved forward, we were asynchronous with our littles. And when I say littles, I say that's pre-KK. 1 and 2 because we, just to provide a little context, Richardson, we were very fortunate in where our spring break fell, really, and because many of the districts surrounding us had spring break before, and we the week before we did, and so we were able to plan that week, and so we made the decision to go ahead and send home devices with students.
Right.
Our elementary campuses had the opportunity to choose whether or not they wanted to send devices home, and many chose not to. And so we had to work out a mechanism by which to get the iPads to our students. But we, by being able to go ahead and send home devices with students and go ahead and tell our teachers, take home your devices, then we were able to pick up and I'm not going to say business as usual because it certainly was not, but able to maximize the systems that we already had in place.
So did that change, like at what point did you guys send home devices with the younger students?
So we gave an opportunity for, and I may have the timeline off just a little bit because I've tried to sleep a little bit since then. But we started with paper packets for our younger students, and then we organized drive-bys where parents and families could come by and actually or walk up and get the iPads from their elementary campuses, and that was optional. We continued to go ahead and send home paper packets for parents, and then really by the end of the summer, I would say we had distributed almost all of our devices to our families. But in the spring, we did have but kind of two systems running. We had paper packets, and we had an iPads home, and so families could choose which they wanted to do.
Okay. Did you get any feedback on the paper packets in general?
Yeah, they were clunky. It was, it's a one size fits all. Obviously, we tried U.S. mail, and that was not as reliable as we would have liked that to be. We had students who were receiving their instruction in English, and parents needed Spanish support. We had families that were received Spanish packets, but they wanted their students to have. So there were a lot of logistic issues with the packets that. But one thing that we also did at the same time is we posted everything online as well in all the paper packet forms, so it was also available to digitally.
Okay, all right, interesting. Okay, well, Mr. Simpson, how about in Arlington? First, tell us kind of a little bit about what your role entails and how your department is structured.
Sure thing. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for the opportunity and the invitation to join this conversation. I've already found it kind of fascinating because there hasn't been a whole lot of time to stop and really investigate what other districts have been doing. So I'm grateful to my panel, my co-panelists, and to the university. Being in Arlington, we're very grateful for UTA's presence, in the city. We've got a ton of teachers and classrooms and administrators at campuses that have graduated from UTA at various levels. And we currently have a lot of student teachers working with teachers, even despite these strained circumstances this school year. I'm the director of the Technology Integration and Innovation Department. In most districts, that would probably be referred to as instructional technology. About 2 years ago, we were organizationally moved from the Technology Services Division, like tech support, network services, all those kind of things, to and nested within teaching and learning. So our partner departments now are curriculum instruction and professional learning within that umbrella. So that's exciting, and it does allow for some additional collaboration. I supervise and lead a team of 12. That includes technology integration specialists. That includes a blended learning coordinator and a blended learning specialist. And then library services actually falls within our umbrella. So there's a library coordinator and a library specialist in Arlington ISD. Dr. Robert, you described this kind of period of, technical experimentation. And I guess what I would just begin by saying is that, like, any question you might have in your minds, my answer would probably be it depends, and it's early. Even though we've been at it for 8 months with summer break, the situation this fall is very different than it was in the spring. And the good news, which was mentioned a moment ago, is that we had some systems in place. That meant we weren't starting from scratch. Now, in contrast to Richardson, we're not a one-to-one district. Now, we're much closer on November 10th, 2020 than we were in early March of 2020, because our district has acquired a lot of additional devices as a result of this crisis. But we basically were a 2-to-1 district. So teachers were well accustomed and increasing their skill levels, blended formats where like a station rotation, would be present, in classrooms. Our device standard in Arlington is K2 iPads, grades 3-12 Chromebooks. And system-wise, we have Canvas in grades 3-12. We've had Canvas now for 6 years. And we actually implemented Seesaw for schools in K2 last fall. So it's interesting. There was never a mandate for the usage of those LMSs in our district, despite the fact that we had them. We even had some parallel systems that were still kind of inserting themselves a little bit, like Google Classroom. And our perspective has kind of been, if we can't convince you to use Canvas, then we haven't done our job. Well, everything changed, obviously, in March, where we needed people to unify all in one system. We felt it'd be entirely unfair to our parents and guardians and to students to have to navigate multiple systems. So I'm a 3rd grader, and some of my classes are going to be in Canvas, some are going to be in Google Classroom, and yeah, there's still a teacher using Edmodo. So like we didn't want that to happen at all. We actually turned off student access to Classroom because we didn't want there to be outliers, which was a big step forward in our district, where there really hadn't been, like I said, any kind of mandate, a certain system to a certain extent, at a certain frequency, on daily instructional practice. So we also are a Google G Suite district. So students and teachers use Google Drive and a lot of the core Google apps on a daily basis. We also are a Microsoft Office 365 district. And Office 365 is available to students and staff. So we certainly don't lack for software and tools and applications that are available to make this go. You asked, Dr. Robert, what about kind of like the reliability of those systems? They've been really strong. There have been a couple outliers, where we planned on doing something or starting something on this day, and it just so happens, maybe Seesaw had an issue that morning. But that's not been the persistent or the ongoing experience. In fact, the reliability of the systems and tools has been a really North Star for this. And if it hadn't been that, or that hadn't been the case, clearly teachers and instructional staff would have had a very different experience, both in the spring and the experience that we're having now would be much more challenging.
Yeah, so students didn't all have devices in the spring.
That's right. So and we had the early spring break. So in fact, like Thursday of that break, I started getting, communications from district leaders about we need to start making plans. Our district really took a thoughtful approach, and this came from senior leadership, where rather than trying to, cram all this needed learning down teachers' throats and training, we really kind of did a phased-in approach, which I'll take a moment to describe, and I'll include kind of the device question in there. So for the first 2 weeks after spring break, basically we spun up on our district website kind of an instructional resources hub that had resources for grade levels, different learner needs, and it was kind of just a hub for students who are now at home, all of them, to go right and hopefully with the younger grades, some kind of parent guardian interaction and retrieve material. And some of that was driving them into systems, right, that are already adopted, digital textbooks, adaptive systems, maybe Canvas and Seesaw. During that time, the technology support department is trying to figure out a device checkout process, because we have lots of devices in campuses now. They're locked in Chromebook carts, they're locked in iPad carts. And the logistical challenge becomes, how do we now disperse those, check those out to students out in the community that need them? So many sites in Arlington campuses became device checkout sites in those coming weeks. Those also were oftentimes the food pickup sites and the paper packet pickup sites for households that didn't have enough devices for every student, preferred a packet format on paper, or maybe at that time didn't have even reliable internet connectivity. So phase one was that 2-week window where we're buying ourselves time, frankly, because we didn't have spring break to leverage for that purpose. And all these departments are working in conjunction to try to pull it together. Phase two was really where we wanted teachers to get really intensive training if they didn't know the foundational skills required to use Seesaw on Canvas. So my department, awesome group of an awesome team, pulled together basically kind of like an emergency training plan and offered sessions basically around the clock for 2+ weeks. And teachers were expected to get these required trainings. Well, students were actually working on new lessons, TEKS aligned and a little bit more scope and sequence aligned lessons as opposed to the first 2 weeks, which were really just kind of generic activities that might engage students who are at home on this crisis footing. So those 3rd and 4th weeks were a lot of lessons and activities that are now designed, available to students in Canvas, designed, available in students in Seesaw, and much of that content was being designed by our curriculum and instruction team. And then what that was all leading towards was phase 3. So after 4 weeks, teachers now designing and leading the instruction via Seesaw or via Canvas directly now with students once again. So we had to kind of build that window of time with which to make this possible. And again, kudos to Arlington ISD's senior leadership, because they recognized that the system needed time to respond to the crisis.
Yeah, so it sounds like both Richardson and Arlington, y'all had, you provided your teachers with a lot of kind of pre-written activities and curriculum so that they could instead focus on the other challenges of getting their students up and running in the new online world, right? Okay, well, great. Well, Ms. Plybon, how about in Keller? Your department had already been providing online learning for students, so you guys were ahead of the game. What did it look like in your department then, and how did that change with the onset of online learning?
So thank you also for having me here. I've already learned so much from the others. I'm so jealous of Richardson for being able to send home things before spring break. That would have made a huge difference. But Keller ISD, by the way, I am in the curriculum and instruction department. I'm part of that department. My department is personalized learning, and we oversee all of the virtual learning programs, which also encompass alternative learning options, blended learning, a lot of different models, because we truly are trying to personalize for, small groups of students at a time. So when everything kind of happened over spring break, there was a lot of things that, first came to mind for a lot of us. And the very first thing that came to mind was, wow, we've already got this online learning program, because we had actually started our online learning program in 2014 with a handful of courses. And now we have a comprehensive catalog of courses that students can choose from in online. So moving into this crisis, we did already have a lot of things in place. Just like Steve was saying, our district is a Canvas, but it's a Canvas and Google Classroom in Seesaw district. We do not mandate what one platform teachers use, but we do say we're only going to support those 3. And all of our data that comes across says that it's pretty close to a 50-50 split between Canvas and Google Classroom, which really drove our decision not to restrict them to one platform. But what we did instead, because as Steve was mentioning, we didn't want parents and students to have to navigate a whole bunch of different things to understand what it was they needed to get done. So we actually utilized, we're also a ClassLink district, and we utilized Backpack within ClassLink so that all of our teachers learned over the course of the summer how to use Backpack in ClassLink, so that students just log into ClassLink, they click their Backpack, and that gives them instant access to wherever their teacher's class is, as well as whatever apps, if a teacher is having them use Newsela one day or Edpuzzle one day or something, that's all in that student's backpack. So it's one place for them to be able to go no matter what platform that the teacher is using. We even found that we're able to pull in additional platforms. So if there's a platform we don't necessarily support, the teacher themselves can put that platform in there, which is kind of nice, because then they still get to use what they're comfortable with. But for me, in my department, because we already had the online learning program, we already had a lot of learning resources. Obviously, we've got a lot of courses. So we started kind of mobilizing those and getting them out there for our teachers to be able to pull into Canvas and things like that. But my very first concern was training. And in Keller ISD, what it turned into is that we have a wonderful educational technology team who already had a lot of training in place, and they continued that and added a bunch more that focused on the tools, the technology tools. Then we have our professional development team that's part of CNI that instantly started creating a PD on demand website where all of us who had already made things could just load that in so that teachers could start clicking around and trying to find things to learn about. What I did in my department, we already had a comprehensive Canvas course, kind of an intense sort of a course. It's an online certification course that teaches teachers all of the Quality Matters standards for quality online teaching. And I opened up cohorts of that immediately after spring break. And we started running through cohorts of 200 teachers at a time over the course of several weeks, because it's a lot of content for them. But over the course of those sessions with those cohorts, we had some synchronous sessions, and it kind of turned into a place where the teachers were learning about how to be a good online teacher. What are the ways to build community in an online classroom? How do I make sure everything's accessible that I put in Canvas? And I actually brought a lot of Google Classroom people over to the Canvas side because it was in Canvas and they got to see how many things we could do in there. But what it also was a support group, because you said at the start, think back to March and what that was like, and we were all lost. And I keep telling everybody, this is all of our first year teaching. Like, this is seriously our first year teaching, because none of us know what to expect. And so that turned in over the summer to little support groups, and we would meet and we would just talk about the things we're concerned about and the things we don't know about, because there was a lot we didn't know about. And I think that it really helped to kind of bring everybody sort of together, even in the unknown, because I know that a lot of times they would ask me questions because they think since I work for the district that I would know the answers. And, none of us had any answers at that time. But I think it was comforting to them to know I would tell them about all the meetings we're having and all the plans we're making and all that stuff. And I think there was just some level of comfort in knowing, well, at least I'm honing my craft while we're waiting to find out. But one of the things that I thought was interesting that came out of that is that even though our mantra was, if you plan for remote, you have planned for everything. And if you've got kids that walk into your classroom, what a great surprise. I already have something for you. But if you plan for the classroom and then you get quarantined, you've got another prep. And even though we really stress that in our trainings, a lot of people just were really very much in the denial phase that this was going to be them, that they were going to have to be teaching remotely, and they didn't really take to heart everything that we were teaching them. So one of the things that we did is we left all of those courses open and available to them, so that now I have teachers who come back and say, thank you for leaving that course open, because now I've gone back and I've visited some of those things that I remember was in there, so that we were able to provide that as a resource. And I'm so thankful that we already had the virtual learning program, because if we hadn't, we wouldn't have already had that kind, that level of an online course for them to take to really understand how to do good course design remotely.
Yeah, and thank you. That kind of brings us from the immediate, emergency state of the spring and into today, when we're now looking at those best practices in curriculum design, rather than making Denise's team keep continuing to write lesson after lesson.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about, and all three of us three of you guys will share information about this, but now that we are in a situation where we have some students in person, some online, we're doing a lot of these blended classrooms, what are some of the best practices, maybe fun apps that you see teachers using, fun activities, and we're going to break that down by level. So as Dr. Beutel calls it, the littles, what have you seen happen at that level? Oh, you're muted.
I think that's like the new phrase of 2020 is, oops, you're on mute.
Yeah.
With our little, Steve, we moved to Seesaw with our littles. We found that through our spring and summer, we learned that that was just going to be a much easier mechanism for them to be able to access, turn in work, take pictures, and really the learning curve for them to be able to access and to log in, that has been great. And so Seesaw is our way of in which our teachers push out assignments and activities. We do with those students, and clearly we have we're asynchronous with those grade levels, and so our teachers we have a very, very predictable schedule that has been very well communicated to our parents, so they know exactly when to log in. We make it very we're very clear with making sure that we have morning message and that we're following those common procedures just like we would. And now we're in an asynchronous format in almost all of our classrooms. And but the beginning of the school year, where we started all remote, we began those practices. And we have really, one of the lessons learned from the spring, or from our time in the spring, is we were creating, and we had created choice boards for our students. And so there was perhaps 9 different learning activities, and you could choose 4 to do that week. And then in the area of mathematics, and then 4 in the area of reading and language arts. And we learned from our parents and from feedback that we were using too many apps. We were going to the Smithsonian, and we were logging into this math app, and we were doing this, and it was too many, and too many places, and it was too confusing to navigate all of the different platforms. And so we really worked to scaling that back, that these are the 2 most robust that we're going to start the year with in the area of mathematics. These are the 2 most robust that we're going to start with. The other really nice thing is that our textbook publishers and our partnerships have really stepped up. And so we were able to immediately, transfer into some digital interactive experiences that were already in a platform that kids were used to. And so we have really tried to maximize those, and then slowly introduce new apps and new platforms. As far as logistically, and really, I would say 3rd grade all the way through 12, Pear Deck and I'm just blanking, but Pear Deck, that's allowing us for small group instruction, helping to facilitate some of the asynchronous learning opportunities where teachers are teaching face-to-face, and they'll send students out to to work in small group or asynchronous learning, then come back for a quick check during that 90-minute learning experience.
Okay, so Steve, Elaine, anything to add to the younger group of students in terms of best practices?
I just real quickly acknowledge that this is an immense challenge for classroom teachers. So there's no like one best practice. There's no one app that is the magic bullet, the silver bullet.
I've seen the pool noodles. Have y'all seen the pool noodles being used for distancing?
And I'll just reiterate what was just shared, and that is simplifying things. Oftentimes less is more. When you have a tool like Seesaw that is robust and is student friendly and is like a lot of tools that we're using a lot in Arlington, that's constantly being improved upon. So our partners in these ed tech companies, they really are innovating within their products to make them better, more dynamic, and very kind of responsive to a customer driven need. So the challenge is immense. The teachers are absolutely awe-inspiring because of their dedication to students, that they're willing to try to teach kids at the same time who are home and present in the class. Because that's what we're doing in Arlington right now. We started the first 6 weeks in fall, fully remote, and now about, it depends campus to campus, but roughly half the kids are going to school and half the kids are staying home. That just presents immense challenges. Other apps we're finding useful, just kind of across any grade level. We have Pear Deck in Arlington. It's really good for kind of live engagement, but it has a self-paced function that allows kids to kind of have some formative checks, as they're being confronted with new content. We licensed something new this year called H5P, which integrates very nicely in Canvas. It allows teachers to design a lot of really cool interactives. Because one thing we were concerned about was a lot of passive and kind of static content, especially in the asynchronous format. A lot of kids are not going to engage with it. So they're not going to click on and answer questions. They're just going to blow right by a video and just try to get to the work, turn it as quickly as possible and move on with their day. So H5P allows for a lot of kind of check for understanding along the way. And then a tool that was bought by Microsoft a couple of years ago is Flipgrid. Flipgrid's a really great tool because it just makes discussions that may be asynchronous kind of fun. So it has a lot of neat features that kids kind of find appealing, like you can add an emoji or a sticker or a filter, to your video recordings and things like that. So those would be some of the ones that I think are being utilized quite a bit. Just one thing to add, in the spring, for that phase 3 window, which led all the way to the end of the school year in May, there really was no expectation because of concerns about student access, right? And there's no habit of this formed. Synchronous or live events weren't really happening. We were pretty much in an asynchronous footing all spring. And it was determined that that really wasn't working for a lot of students. They needed FaceTime with their teacher. So this fall, that was introduced. So kids as young as kindergartners are using like a guest or clicking on a link to access a Zoom or access a Microsoft Teams meeting. So they have some face-to-face interaction with their teacher on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you. And Elaine, how about you?
Yeah, I would add to what Steve was saying that, one of the things that we learned was it was so important for us to be sure that we were also thinking about that parent of the little, because being the parent of a very, very young student at home is a completely different challenge from being a parent of a middle school or high school or something like that. Still have challenges at those grades too, but it's a completely different thing. So what we found is that they really, we were just like with Arlington, we started off with very asynchronous for everything, but then we quickly realized for the fall that we had to have more of a familiarity, kind of a schedule of sorts, so that students and parents would understand, okay, now this is second period, and I'm gonna, even for our high school and middle school, I'm gonna log in now for this, I'm gonna log in now for this. So I think that was really, really important for us to have that realization about how important it was to also think about our parents. So a couple of apps that weren't mentioned, we really use Nearpod, which is very similar to Pear Deck. And then we also purchased a district license for Edpuzzle, because that allows for a teacher to create, stop points in videos to make students respond or predict or reflect or things like that, so that as they were using videos, creating videos, etc., they were able to also ensure that that student was watching it. The other thing that we did is we use Edgenuity in our district for credit recovery, but I also use it as a textbook of sorts. So we were able to immediately, we actually have the license to be able to put it all into Canvas as little pieces. So we immediately made all of that available for 6th through 12th grade, so that the core content teachers wouldn't have to make videos. They could have the Edgenuity teacher provide instruction, and then they could just build around that. And I think that for the teachers who utilize that resource, that saved them so much time, because, we're teachers in a classroom. We are not television producers. We are not video editors. And so that was initially a lot of frustration for the teachers. They felt like they had to make a video for everything. But we were able to provide a lot of those resources, so they could say, oh, well, this person on Edgenuity, it describes functions very, very well, so I'm just going to use that in my classroom. And then all I have to do is build my assessments in. So that's something that we also already had in place for remediation purposes, but we pushed that out to a greater extent for our teachers to be able to use that resource as well.
Excellent, thanks. So any major differences for secondary students other than they've had more synchronous instruction for everybody?
I would maybe just highlight that, a challenge, I think, with secondary this fall as compared to the spring was that in the spring, a lot of expectations were by kind of demand loosened. And secondary students seem to be having difficulty kind of getting back in a mindset of it counts, like it's real this year, because in some cases there was a lot of flexibility and grace provision to them in the spring, and we're hearing from teachers that many students still are under the impression, maybe false impression, that same thing is true in the 2021 school year. So that's definitely a challenge I think secondary teachers are facing, probably more than at the elementary level.
I think we also have noticed that we have to help our teachers to remember that our students, our secondary students, are extremely social people who have been kept from being social for a very, very long time now. And that they need a lot of that social emotional learning support, just like the younger ones do. And so a lot of our teachers have figured out that, at the start of a Zoom session, they actually have to let it go and let them chat and let them connect with each other and let them express themselves. And I think that was an important thing for us to remember, because I know a lot of the initial response was that, well, these are older kids, and we've got the virtual learning program, so most of them have taken an online class before, so they know what the expectations are. We can kind of let them run with it. They actually still need a lot of support at the secondary level, and I think that's a big takeaway.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, Elaine, I really appreciate you saying that, and then and want to echo. I think that's true even for our elementary students, but we're here, the social and emotional toll about the social aspect, but then also just students seeing their families engage in just the myriad of challenges that is really taking a toll. And so we are partnering with our special student services to make sure that our teachers are equipped with tools to facilitate discussions, but at the same time, it's a layered approach, because oftentimes our parents are also experiencing some stressors with regards to the pandemic and the election and the challenges with co-seating, and I guess this, this is to be assumed, but clearly we're leveraging Zoom as much as we possibly can. If, you know, as for our co-seated, and when I say co-seated, we've got half of our students face-to-face. I think it's called different things in different districts, but we use that term to say some of our students in the classroom are face-to-face, and then some of the students are remote at home, but the learning is taking place at the same time. And so we, but that really, our teachers are doing a phenomenal job. But one of the things that's really, we're kind of in some ways, I think someone said, and Steve, it may have been you, like we're all first year teachers again, in that, you know, we're talking about that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we can't forget of where our kids are, and in many ways our teachers are too, and in many ways we're our first year teachers. So those early beginning teaching techniques of, remember, like use the popsicle sticks to pull out, or how are you going to be checking for understanding periodically to make sure that your students are engaged, and how are you going to use the chat to you know, take attendance, and what are those kind of basic day-to-day pieces that can help make sure that we're connecting with kids, and also, frankly, I mean, our teachers feel successful. So many of our secondary teachers have talked about, you know, and in Zoom, it's so hard. You know, I don't get to see the spark in my students' eye when they get it. I don't get to see the nod. I don't get to see the hands-on as they are working out a problem and sharing their ways of solving that with their neighbor. And that is some of the fuel that they get that helps propel them for the next lesson. And that's been difficult in this environment. And so we're trying to support and help them and celebrate them and all of the hard work that they're doing, and letting them know just all the great ways that they are making a positive impact with kids.
So Dr. Beutel, that raises the question, and you know, we're all first year teachers again. Do we need major changes in how we supervise and evaluate our teaching staff?
This year, we all need grace. We all, you know, I think it just, myself included, I was on mute just a second ago. You know, I think we are all very much struggling and entering the learning space with varying levels of expertise, but also bringing with us varying levels of stressors that have been brought on by this pandemic. And
what do you, oh, sorry, I didn't mean
no. So to your point, I think, yes, as you know, the traditional walkthrough I'm looking for, and I think there is a vast element of grace that needs to be afforded to our teachers and students.
Excellent, thanks. Ms. Plybon, what do you think about supervision and evaluation for since you've been evaluating,
yeah,
your full-time online teachers already for a few years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got the full-time online teachers. I also have about 25 adjunct teachers and about 15 campus-based mentors. So over the years, we've developed processes for evaluating teachers and mentors. And in fact, this year, TEA came out with their updated T-test rubrics for online teaching. I do think that I agree with Dr. Beutel that, you know, grace is the word of the year, like for everybody, for parents, for students, for everybody. But I do think too that if we lose sight of the fact that this is going to change education forever, there's some things that we're not going to ever return to. There are some things that we will return to, but we'll also still have some of the things that we've started now. So I think it's really important as we move forward that we don't ignore those remote classrooms or those online classrooms, because what we find is a lot of people just don't understand, how would I evaluate a teacher who's teaching online? And I think it's really important for administrators to be thinking about, how will I evaluate my teachers who are online? And when we have teachers who are co-seated or who have some classes that are online and some classes that are not, I think it's kind of important for them to be maybe taking a look at both ways for a teacher, because, you know, as we make decisions about who's going to be teaching online or remotely in the future, we need to know what we're looking for. I'm lucky because I know what I'm looking for, because we've had online teachers for a long time. But, you know, I think that it's important for administrators not to kind of look at this as this is just because of COVID, and look more at it as because of COVID, we're changing, and it's kind of an exponential change and a punctuated evolution of education. And it's important for us to be thinking about, while we are giving them grace, to be thinking about how am I going to evaluate this? And one of the things that I have found to be extremely preferential when evaluating a teacher online versus evaluating a teacher in the classroom is that 45 minutes that I spend clicking around in their Canvas course or their Google Classroom tells me more than that 45 minutes in that classroom can, because I see their instructional design. I see their building of community. I see how they differentiated for students. I see everything in 45 minutes. I can see how well they've built rapport with their students, and how they've corrected off-task behavior. I can see that all. When we walk into a classroom to do an evaluation, I'm at the luck of that 45 minutes. What is that teacher doing that day? I don't necessarily see them. I'm not going to see them sitting down and writing their lesson plan. But in the online world actually provides us that opportunity to really see the entire lesson cycle, and what did this teacher think when she was putting this together, and how did the students end up taking it, and how did the teacher come back and redirect, and those kind of things. They're all right there. It's kind of a beautiful thing, the amount of data that we have available to us in the online world. So I really would encourage administrators to really kind of be looking at, what will this look like next year? Because you're going to have students that are still going to be, you know, for whatever reason, are going to be remote for some reason. So having that understanding now and be thinking about that now is the way to be.
Final word to Mr. Simpson on that before we turn it over to questions from the audience.
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts about evaluation. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that most teachers this year, they don't care a thing about evaluation. Evaluation is supposed to be a growth metric in the first place, right? It's supposed to be kind of reflection that drives, you know, my next steps as a professional. I don't think teachers are focused on surviving the school year, right? And trying to do their best on behalf of the students. Administrators who find that they're trying to, you know, conduct evaluations with the same kind of intention as in the past, I think are maybe missing out on an opportunity to think about a reflection as a new driver of professional growth. That's one thought. And then the other would just be that, that being said, in Arlington, we developed some monitoring tools for administrators who might be going into Canvas really for the first time, and try to align that tool to the attributes that we highlighted as being really important and rolled out this summer, so that they have a tool that they can go in and they can kind of check and just, you know, do you see evidence of intentional efforts to engage students? Do you see evidence that peer-to-peer dialogue, you know, or discourse is being fostered? You know, those types of things, but not judgments. Just, is there evidence or is there not? So it's important, and Elaine's right. I'd be shocked if we have this many students working fully online this year, and come next August, even if they can all go back to school, we don't get a lot of feedback about, you know what, my kid would prefer to stay home because it worked for him. Because it's working for a lot of students, even if it's not the majority.
Yeah. Thank you. All right, we've got the questions rolling in. Let's see. Colin, you want to take it away on that?
Sure thing. So first from Stacy Baker, what do you foresee as immediate next steps as we continue this world into the spring? What are the highest leverage improvement points for online learning moving forward?
Well, I would say that moving into the spring, one of the things that we've discussed and in my department is the likelihood that students who are still opting for the remote option are likely, there's going to be kids that are just going to be like, this actually is working for me, and this is the way that I'm doing well. And the parents might be like, it's actually kind of nice having the kids home all day, and I really like that they're doing so well. So I think moving into the spring, we start looking more at who are our students who have chosen to continue with this, and then as far as the improvement points, I think that it's really important for us to continue just the really, I don't want to say really positive, but the growth mindset of all of this, and really helping parents and teachers and campus administrators delineate between, as Steve was saying, the way we were in the spring is not quality online teaching. Remote is not the same in my district, at least. Remote is not the same as online teaching, and we're actually working on creating a side-by-side for people so that they understand, here's what remote was or is, and here's what online learning is. And I think it's really important moving forward to kind of be thinking about, how does this change the way that we do things, and how do we it's like I tell everybody, and I told a bunch of people today, I don't think it's going to be hundreds of thousands. All of our kids are not going to be wanting to stay home next year, but there's going to be enough of them who are going to be wanting to stay home next year that now is our opportunity to truly personalize, give students that options for flexible scheduling or at home options and things like that. And I think right now, as district administrators, we've already started next year. Like, we're already in there, and we have to be thinking about these things as well.
I'd only add that we've surveyed teachers recently pretty comprehensively, and that data is kind of being analyzed right now. And I imagine it's going to reveal a lot of things that, as district leaders and supports, we are going to need to prioritize to better serve the folks in the classrooms.
I think we just have time for one quick question.
All right, this from Kathy Pham. This question can go to anyone on the panel. We spoke about teacher evaluations and how that would differ this school year, but how do you all hold teachers accountable for delivering quality instruction daily? Do you go into each online class every day? Do you check in every other day?
Dr. Beutel, you want to take that one?
Sure, we work with our campus principals to make sure that they have the tools and checklists to help monitor the instruction. I think exactly what Elaine was saying, and I think in a pure virtual world, I think it is easier to go in and see the co-seated. I think presents a level of challenges, and so we do have those kind of traditional walkthroughs, and where we're looking for the some of those exact same things. Is the learning objective posted? What is the level of student engagement? That type of piece. But then we are also looking for the ways in which we're connecting with kids, and how are we reteaching and checking for understanding. In our district, we have Plybon many years ago, we're talking about priority standards, and then it's moved to essential standards, and it's moved to lots of different things about coalescing our curriculum and really focusing in on what's most important. And we've tried to be very transparent that in this unit, where there are 36 TEKs that need to be taught, these are the 5 that kids must know. And feel free to take the time to build the requisite skills if they didn't come to you with the knowledge and skills, so that you can and so what does that look like as a campus principal going in and monitoring that? How do we support our teachers in feeling and having the freedom to take more time on those high priority standards to make sure that our students are really learning to the depth and the rigor that they need to? And so those are the discussions that we're having about student engagement, and then making sure that we're mastering those essential standards.
Well, we could easily continue discussing this for hours, but we're about out of time for this session. I'd like to thank our panelists for their time. I'd also like to thank Dean Doty, Colin Yoxall, Brian Brown, Peggy Semmingson, Joyce Myers, and Tatiana Coracina for their efforts in facilitating our conversation tonight. Don't forget that the recording for this session will be available for your access. And don't forget to register for our next session on equitable classroom practices, which will be on December 8th. Good night, everyone. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.